The wind carries secrets in this high, lonely country. It whispers through the barren branches of cottonwoods, stirs the tall prairie grass bleached white under the moonlight, and rattles the loose boards of a solitary cabin, standing defiant against the vast Dakota wilderness. Inside that cabin, Sarah Miller wakes with a gap, her nightgown damp with cold sweat. The nightmare again. The collapsing mine shaft, the rumble of timber, giving way. Matthew's scream cutting through the darkness, then silence. Always silence. Her trembling fingers find the worn gold band on the chain around her neck as moonlight spills through the single window, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn floor. Something moves outside. Sarah rises, wraps a threadbare shawl around her shoulders, and peers through the warped glass. A horse stands at the creek's edge, a tall bay with a powerful chest, its coat slick with sweat despite the night chill. Blood darkens its left flank where a deep gash has carved through muscle. But it's what the animal drags that holds Sarah's gaze. A leather saddlebag torn open on one side, spilling its contents onto the frost-hardened ground. Gold. Raw nuggets catching moonlight like fallen stars. Sarah's breath catches. As she watches, a figure appears on the distant ridge. A man, tall and still, as the pines observing not her, but the horse. The moonlight glints off something in his hand. A rifle. Her fate and his strangers until this moment have just become irrevocably entangled by what lies scattered in the dirt between them. The morning brings harsh clarity to the Dakota territory. Dawn creeps across the endless prairie, painting the rolling hills gold and rust. Sarah's homestead sits in a shallow valley, 40 acres of stubborn hope carved from wilderness. A small cabin with a pitched roof and stone chimney. A chicken coop with 3 remaining hens. A vegetable garden now dormant under the early frost. A single cottonwood tree standing sentinel near the creek where last night's apparition appeared. Sarah Miller moves through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. 35 years have weathered her face, etched fine lines around eyes that have seen too much hardship. Her hands are strong, calloused from work, but her movements betray a bone-deep weariness as she kindles the cookstove fire. Her dark hair, streaked with the first threads of silver, is pulled back in a practical braid. The cabin interior speaks of better days now faded. A patchwork quilt lovingly made a bookshelf with medical texts and botanical guides, pressed flowers in frames. But emptiness haunts the corners, supplies dwindling. A chair where someone should be sitting. Sarah lifts a floorboard beneath her bed, revealing a small metal box. Inside, $18.42. She counts it again, lips moving silently. Not enough. The banknote pinned to the wall above her table makes that clear. Final payment due by month's end, or the land reverts to the bank. To Victor Garrett. She takes her father's old spyglass from the shelf and steps outside. The morning air is knife-sharp in her lungs. She scans the creek bank where the horse stood last night, looking for any evidence that might confirm she hadn't dreamed it all. Nothing remains but hoofprints in the mud and a faint trail leading toward the fence line that separates her property from her neighbor's land. Her gaze follows that invisible boundary to the distant homestead of Ethan Gray. Smoke rises from his chimney, thin and gray against the pale sky. In 3 years, she has spoken to him exactly twice. Once when Matthew was still alive, once at Matthew's funeral. A man of so few words, he seemed almost mute, his granite face betraying nothing. The town whispers about him. A man hollowed out by grief, dangerous or perhaps touched by something that sent him retreating from the world. The spyglass reveals movement, Ethan Gray leading a horse into his corral. Not his usual mount, but a bay with a bandaged flank. The horse from last night. Sarah lowers the spyglass, her breath clouding before her. So it was real. The gold too, most likely. A fortune just walked onto her land and was taken by her silent neighbor. She should feel outrage, perhaps. Instead, she feels something else stirring, curiosity and an odd sense of inevitability. A distant memory surfaces, Matthew laughing, telling stories of the Black Hills and the rumors of gold. One strike, he'd said, eyes fever bright, one good strike, and we'd never worry again. Then he'd gone to work in that mine and never returned, the wind shifts carrying the promise of early snow. Sarah turns away from Ethan's property and heads to her garden. Dreams don't feed a body. Gold that isn't in her possession won't save her land. She has herbs to harvest before frost claims them, tinctures to prepare for Dr. Foster in town. The work of survival doesn't wait for mysteries to unfold. As Sarah kneels in the dirt digging carefully around roots of echinacea and yarrow, her mind wanders back to her life before this harsh place. Philadelphia. Her father's medical practice where she had assisted learning the properties of plants in the art of healing. Then Matthew Miller with his wild dreams and wilder smile, promising adventure and land of their own under the Homestead Act. 160 acres, he'd said. We work it for 5 years and it's ours forever. Forever had turned out to be much shorter than promised. She works through the morning, the sun climbing higher in a sky so vast it makes her feel impossibly small. Around noon, she straightens, pressing a hand to her aching back. That's when she notices it, something hanging from the fence post where her property meets Ethan Gray's. A burlap sack. Sarah approaches cautiously. The sack is heavy and inside she finds coffee beans, salt pork flour. More provisions than she's seen in months. There is no note, no explanation. Just sustenance appearing like manna when she needed it most. She looks toward Ethan's house but sees no movement. It could be charity. It could be payment. For use of her land for the injured horse crossing her property. It could be something else entirely. But the meaning is clear enough. Ethan Gray had seen her need and answered it without words. Sarah carries the provisions back to her cabin, emotions warring within her. Pride chafes against gratitude, independence against the raw fact of hunger. She places the items on her table, then goes to her small pantry where a single jar remains. Wild plum preserves she and Matthew had made that first summer. She takes it, returns to the fence post, and leaves it there. An answer to his silent statement. By late afternoon, the jar is gone, replaced by 2 rabbits cleaned and dressed for cooking. The first snow begins to fall as dusk approaches, not the killing blizzard that will come later in the season, but a gentle warning of winter's approach. Sarah watches the flakes from her doorway, the rabbits now simmering in a stew that fills the cabin with a richness she hasn't experienced in too long. The fence post stands empty in the gathering dark. As night falls fully, Sarah lights her lamp and takes out her journal. She has kept faithful records since arriving in this territory. Weather patterns, plant growth cycles, expenses and income. The discipline of it keeps her tethered to civilization, to the educated woman she once was before this land began to scour her down to essentials. A knock at the door startles her, so unexpected in her isolation that for a moment she thinks she imagined it. But it comes again firm and deliberate. Sarah takes her father's old revolver from the shelf, checks that it's loaded, and approaches the door cautiously. "Who's there?" she calls, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. "Clara Wilson from town," comes the reply, a woman's voice familiar. Sarah opens the door to find the town seamstress standing on her porch, snowflakes melting in her gray hair. Clara clutches a package wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Wilson, this is unexpected." Sarah steps back, gesturing the older woman inside. They aren't friends exactly, but Clara has always been kind, one of the few townspeople who doesn't look at Sarah with that mixture of pity and judgment reserved for a woman alone. "I finished altering that dress you brought in." Clara places the package on the table. "Thought I'd bring it out rather than wait for your next trip to town." Her eyes take in the cabin, noting the simmering pot on the stove. "You're doing all right out here." "Well enough." Sarah sets the revolver aside. "Can I offer you some tea or stew?" Clara sits at the small table unwinding her scarf. "Tea would be lovely. It's getting cold out there." As Sarah prepares the tea, Clara's gaze wanders to the banknote on the wall. "Garrett's still pressing you on that loan. Final payment due by month's end." Sarah keeps her voice neutral. "I'm working on it." Clara's mouth tightens. "That man? Well, there's talk in town." "There's always talk." Sarah places a steaming cup before her visitor. "Different kind of talk." Clara leans forward. "A stranger came through last week, asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About a man fitting Matthew's description." Sarah's hand stills on her own cup. "Matthew's been dead for 2 years." Clara meets her eyes. "That's what I thought too. But this stranger, he had a sketch. Good likeness. Said he'd seen this man in Deadwood not 3 months ago." The cabin suddenly seems colder, despite the fire. Sarah sits heavily in the chair opposite Clara. "That's not possible." "That's what I said." Clara sips her tea. "But then old Joe, you know the prospector who drinks at Harris's place, he said something strange. Said he'd seen Matthew too. right before the mine collapsed. Said Matthew was acting peculiar nervous-like, carrying something heavy out to his horse. Sarah's mind races back to that day. Matthew leaving before dawn, kissing her goodbye. Going to make us rich, he'd said. Then hours later, the foreman from the mine pounding on her door with news of the collapse. No survivors, no bodies recovered. The earth had swallowed them whole. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah's voice sounds distant to her own ears. Clara's weathered face softens with sympathy. "Because Garrett asked about the stranger too, seemed mighty interested, and now the stranger's gone. Left town suddenly, they say." A chill runs through Sarah that has nothing to do with the snow outside. "You think Garrett had something to do with that?" "I don't know." Clara wraps her hands around her cup. "But you live out here alone near Ethan Gray's place. If there is trouble coming, you should know." After Clara leaves, Sarah sits in the growing darkness, her mind churning. Matthew alive. It isn't possible. Yet doubt gnaws at her. There had been no body, just the mine foreman's word and Matthew's hat retrieved from the entrance to the collapsed shaft. She thinks of the horse at the creek, the gold spilling from its saddlebag. Coincidence or something else entirely? Sleep eludes her that night. She lies awake listening to the wind, thinking of Ethan Gray and his silent offering of food of Garrett and his hungry eyes whenever he looks at her land of Matthew and his dreams of striking it rich. Connections forming like a spider's web, invisible until the light catches it just so. Morning brings a sky the color of hammered steel, threatening more snow. Sarah dresses warmly and sets out toward town. 5 miles of hard walking, but Clara's news has lit a fire in her that demands answers. Redemption, Dakota Territory, 1876. The town consists of one main street lined with false-fronted buildings. A general store, Harris's saloon, the sheriff's office, Dr. Foster's practice, Clara's dress shop, and dominating it all, Garrett's bank and mercantile. 22 buildings in all, clinging to civilization like a burr on a horse's mane. Sarah enters the general store first, needing supplies and information in equal measure. The shopkeeper Hammond greets her with the same careful politeness he always shows. Respect for a doctor's daughter mingled with unease at a woman living alone. "Mrs. Miller, what can I get for you today?" "Coffee and salt, Mr. Hammond, and perhaps news about this stranger Clara Wilson mentioned." Hammond's eyes dart around his empty store. "Don't know much about that. Man came ask questions, left." "Questions about my husband." Hammond busies himself measuring coffee beans. "Weren't my business to pry." "But you heard things." The shopkeeper sighs. "Said he was looking for a man named Miller. Matthew Miller. Said this Miller had taken something that didn't belong to him." He passes her the wrapped package of coffee. "That's all I know, Mrs. Miller." Sarah pays for her purchases, her mind working. Something taken. Gold, perhaps, the kind that might be carried in a saddlebag. Her next stop is Dr. Foster's office. The old doctor has been a tenuous connection to her former life, respecting her knowledge of medicinal herbs, occasionally consulting her on treatments. If anyone would speak plainly to her, it would be him. The doctor's office smells of carbolic acid and dried herbs. Foster himself sits at his desk, spectacles perched on his nose as he reviews a medical journal. He looks up as she enters, his bushy white eyebrows rising. "Sarah, didn't expect to see you in town today." "I brought those tinctures you asked for." She places small bottles on his desk. "Echinacea and golden seal. Should help with the Thompson boy's infection." "Much appreciated." He gestures to a chair. "Sit. You look troubled." Sarah sinks into the offered seat. "I've heard rumors about Matthew." Foster removes his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief. "Clara's been talking, I take it. Is there any truth to it? Could Matthew have survived that collapse?" The doctor is silent for a long moment. "The mine collapse was real enough. 3 men died, but what? I never examined any bodies, Sarah. The company said recovery was impossible. Too dangerous." Hope and dread twist together in her stomach. "So he could be alive." Foster sighs heavily. "I don't know, but I do know this. If Matthew Miller is alive and hasn't come home to you in 2 years, there's a reason for that, and it may not be one you want to discover." Sarah leaves the doctor's office with more questions than answers. Her final stop looms before her. Garrett's bank and mercantile. She steels herself before entering, knowing what awaits inside. Victor Garrett's establishment dominates the town in the same way he dominates its business. The front serves as a general store, far better stocked than Hammond's modest shop. The rear houses the bank, where Garrett holds the financial fate of half the county in his ledgers. Garrett himself stands behind the counter, 55 years old, barrel-chested, with a meticulously trimmed beard and eyes that calculate profit in every interaction. His smile appears as she enters, too wide, too practiced. "Mrs. Miller, what a pleasant surprise." Sarah approaches the counter, keeping her voice level. "Mr. Garrett, I've come about the loan." "Ah, yes." He pulls out a ledger, though she suspects he knows every figure by heart. "Due at the end of the month, $117.50. His eyes flick up to her face. "Will that be a problem?" The amount represents nearly all she has made in the past year. They both know it's impossible. "I need an extension." Garrett's smile doesn't waver. "Extensions cost money, Mrs. Miller. Interest accumulates. My herb business is growing. Dr. Foster relies on my tinctures. With a little more time is a luxury." Garrett closes the ledger with a snap. "But perhaps we could come to another arrangement." Sarah feels a chill despite the store's warmth. "What kind of arrangement?" "Your land adjoins Ethan Gray's property, which adjoins the creek. Water rights are valuable in this territory." He leans forward slightly. "Sell to me now and I'll forgive the debt entirely. You could take a room in town, perhaps work for Clara, a more suitable situation for a woman alone." The offer hangs between them, reasonable on its surface, predatory underneath. Sarah thinks of her homestead, the garden she's nurtured from barren soil, the fruit trees just beginning to take hold, the cabin that, despite everything, is home. "I'll have your payment by the end of the month, Mr. Garrett." His smile tightens. "As you wish. Though I wonder," he studies her face, "have you given any thought to remarrying? A woman needs protection in this country." "I protect myself well enough." "Of course." He straightens. "By the way, I couldn't help noticing that bay horse in Ethan Gray's corral. Fine animal. Looks like it's been through some trouble." Sarah keeps her expression neutral. "I wouldn't know about Mr. Gray's affairs." "No neighbors should look out for one another." Garrett strokes his beard. "There's been talk of horse thieves in the territory. A bay, matching that description, was reported stolen from a mining camp near Deadwood. Belonged to a prospector who disappeared. Foul play suspected. That's the sheriff's concern, not mine." "Indeed." Garrett's eyes harden slightly. "Sheriff Cooper will be investigating, I'm sure. Just thought you should know, being neighbors with Gray and all. Man's not right in the head from what I hear. Lost his wife and boy to fever some years back. Lives like a hermit. Peculiar." Sarah recognizes the warning beneath his words. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Garrett. I'll have your payment by month's end." She leaves the bank, feeling Garrett's eyes on her back. The snow is falling more heavily now, the street turning to mud beneath it. As she passes the sheriff's office, the door opens, and Sheriff James Cooper steps out, adjusting his hat against the weather. Cooper is a lean man in his 40s, with a weathered face and eyes that miss nothing. A former bounty hunter who took the badge 3 years ago, bringing a rough justice to the territory. He nods at Sarah. "Mrs. Miller, town visit or is trouble?" "Just supplies, Sheriff." She pauses. "Though I hear there's been talk of a stranger asking questions." Cooper studies her face. "Word travels fast. Man came looking for someone he claimed cheated his employer. Had a sketch that looked a powerful lot like your late husband." "So I heard. He's gone now." "Left 2 days ago, headed south." Cooper's gaze is penetrating. "Strange coincidence, him showing up, and then Gray getting a new horse matching one stolen from a Deadwood mining camp." Sarah feels a flicker of alarm. "You think Mr. Gray stole it?" "Didn't say that." Cooper adjusts his gun belt. "But I'll be riding out that way tomorrow to ask some questions. Might stop by your place too." "I'll put coffee on." Cooper touches the brim of his hat. "Obliged. You heading back now? Storm's coming in. Could turn nasty." "I'll be fine. I know the way." The sheriff looks unconvinced but nods. "Watch yourself, Mrs. Miller. Territory's full of desperate men these days." The walk back to her homestead is harder than the journey in. The wind has picked up, driving snow into her face, and darkness falls early under the heavy clouds. By the time her cabin comes into view, Sarah is exhausted, her thoughts a turbulent mix of Matthew Garrett, the mysterious gold, and what Sheriff Cooper might discover tomorrow. As she approaches her door, something catches her eye. A dark shape on her porch. For a moment, fear spikes through her. Then she recognizes it, a canvas sack similar to the one that had contained Ethan's gift of provisions. But larger, Sarah scans the surrounding area, seeing no one. The snow has covered any tracks. She drags the heavy sack inside, closes and bars her door, then kindles her lamp to examine the mysterious delivery. The sack contains firewood, good seasoned oak that will burn hot and long, and beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, a package of smoked venison, enough to last weeks. On top of the wood lies a single object that makes her breath catch. A hunting knife with a bone handle, its blade recently sharpened. A practical gift, a means of protection offered without commentary. Sarah holds the knife, testing its weight and balance. Then she notices something else, a small tear in the oilcloth wrapping the venison. Curious, she unwraps it fully, and a piece of paper falls out. Not a note from Ethan as she half expected, but something else entirely. A photograph, dog-eared and stained. In the photograph, Matthew, her Matthew, stands with his arm around a woman Sarah has never seen before. A pretty woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. Between them stands a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, holding a toy wooden horse. Sarah turns the photograph over with trembling hands. Written on the back, in faded ink, "With love, Elizabeth and Robert, 1868. 1868, a year after Matthew had supposedly died in the mine collapse. Sarah sinks to the floor, the photograph clutched in her hand, the world tilting beneath her. Matthew alive. Matthew with another family. Matthew, who had abandoned her, faked his death, left her struggling alone while he built a new life elsewhere. Outside, the storm howls, mirroring the tempest within her. The knife Ethan left glints in the lamplight, a gift with new meaning now. Had he known, is this why he left the photograph for her to find the gold? The horse, the stranger asking questions. Garrett's warnings about Ethan, the sheriff's impending visit. Pieces of a puzzle shifting into new configurations. Sarah stares at the photograph until her vision blurs with tears of rage and betrayal. When she finally rises, her face is set with a new determination. If Matthew is alive, if he's been living a lie while she fought to survive, then everything else might be a lie too. Tomorrow she will get answers. From Ethan Gray, from Sheriff Cooper, from whoever can tell her the truth. The storm builds through the night, rattling the windows and moaning down the chimney. Sarah sleeps fitfully, the photograph tucked beneath her pillow, like a talisman of betrayal. She dreams of mines collapsing, of gold nuggets stained with blood, of Matthew walking away without looking back. Dawn breaks gray and threatening the storm, having settled into a steady, ominous presence. Sarah dresses warmly, tucks the knife Ethan gave her into her boot, and prepares to cross the boundary that has separated their properties for 3 years. The photograph she places in her pocket, a weight against her heart. She is halfway to Ethan's cabin when she sees him, not at his home, but walking the fence line that divides their land, checking for damage from the storm. He stops when he spots her waiting as she approaches. Snow dusts his broad shoulders and the brim of his hat. His face remains impassive, but his eyes, gray as the winter sky, watch her with a wariness that suggests he knows why she's come. Sarah stops a few feet from him, the fence between them still a symbolic barrier. She takes out the photograph, holds it up so he can see. "You left this for me to find." It's not a question. Ethan gives a single short nod. Why, the word contains all her confusion, anger, and grief. Ethan looks at the photograph, then back to her face. When he speaks, his voice is low and rough from disuse. "You deserve to know." "Know what? That my husband faked his death, that he has another family." Sarah's voice rises against the wind. "Or that you've been watching me struggle for years knowing he was alive." Ethan's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Not guilt exactly, but a deep, resolute sadness. "Wasn't watching you all that time." He glances toward his cabin. "Come inside, storm's getting worse." Sarah hesitates, then follows as he leads the way to his home. The invitation itself is significant. In 3 years, she has never set foot on his property, never seen the inside of his cabin. Ethan's home is larger than hers, built of squared logs chinked tightly against the weather. The interior is spare but orderly, a stone fireplace with banking coals, a table and chairs, shelves lined with books that surprise her. A man's home, but not an uncivilized one. He gestures to a chair near the fire, then moves to stoke the flames. Sarah remains standing, unwilling to accept his hospitality until she has answers. How long have you known about Matthew? Ethan straightens, facing her. 6 months. How? He moves to a trunk against the wall, opens it, and removes an object wrapped in cloth. Unwrapping it, he reveals a ledger bound in worn leather. He hands it to her without comment. Sarah opens it, finding pages of neat handwriting. Dates, locations, names. A record of some kind. She flips through until a familiar name leaps out at her, Matthew Miller. Next to it, a date 6 months ago and a location, Deadwood. What has this been tracking? A group of men? Ethan's voice remains level. Men who robbed the stage at Fort Pierre 3 years ago. Men who killed my wife and son when they took shelter in the stage station during a storm. The revelation hits Sarah like a physical blow. She looks up from the ledger to Ethan's face, seeing it in a new light. Not just a man hollowed by grief, but by a specific violent loss. You're hunting them. Was. He takes the ledger back. Found the last one 6 months ago. A cold understanding begins to dawn. Matthew. Ethan nods once. Not for the stage robbery. He joined them after. Helped with 2 bank jobs in Montana, then disappeared with his share. Sarah sinks into the chair legs, suddenly unable to support here. Matthew was an outlaw. Became one. Ethan moves to the window, looking out at the worsening storm. Man can change, for better or worse. The horse, the gold, it was Matthew's, was. Ethan turns back to her. Horse found its way to my property 3 days ago. Saddlebag still attached. Blood on the saddle. Sarah's hand goes to her mouth. Is he? Dead, don't know. Ethan's gaze is direct. But he was running from something, or someone. The pieces click together in Sarah's mind with terrible clarity. The stranger in town. He was tracking Matthew. Hired gun most likely. Someone Matthew crossed. Sarah thinks of Garrett's interest in the stranger and Ethan's new horse. Garrett seemed to know about the horse, about it being stolen. Something hardens in Ethan's expression. Garrett knows more than he lets on about many things. A gust of wind rattles the windows, the storm intensifying outside. Sarah stares at the ledger in Ethan's hands, at the record of his patient, methodical hunt for justice. Why tell me now? Why leave me the photograph? Ethan is silent for a long moment. When he speaks, each word seems carefully chosen. Sheriff's coming, asking questions. You needed to know what he might find. He looks directly at her. Needed to decide where you stand. Where I stand, with the law, with the truth, with your husband. His expression remains unreadable. Or with the land, your future here. The implication is clear. If Matthew's crimes come to light, if his connection to her becomes known, her position in the community, her ownership of the homestead, everything could be at risk. Sarah thinks of the homestead, land she has fought for, suffered for, land that represents not just property, but her independence, her identity beyond being Matthew's widow. Land that Garrett covets and that the bank will claim if she can't make the payment. I don't even know if Matthew is alive or dead, she says finally. May find out soon enough. Ethan nods toward the window. Rider coming. Sarah moves to the window. Through the swirling snow, she can make out a figure on horseback approaching Ethan's cabin. The broad-shouldered silhouette of Sheriff Cooper. He's early. She turns to Ethan. What will you tell him? The truth. Found a horse. Don't know whose it is. And the gold? Something like grim humor flickers across Ethan's face. What gold? The implications of his response aren't lost on Sarah. Ethan has hidden the gold, removed it from the equation. Whether to protect himself or her, or for some other purpose, she can't be sure. Sheriff Cooper's knock comes firm and authoritative. Ethan opens the door, snow swirling in around the lawman's bulky form. Gray. Cooper nods, then notices Sarah. Surprise registers briefly on his weathered face. Mrs. Miller? Didn't expect to find you here. Mr. Gray was kind enough to offer shelter when the storm worsened, Sarah says smoothly. I was returning some tools he'd lent me. Cooper's gaze moves between them, assessing. Neighborly of him. He removes his hat, shaking snow from it. Mind if I come in? Got some questions need asking. Ethan steps back, allowing the sheriff entry. Cooper stomps snow from his boots, his eyes already scanning the cabin interior with professional attention. Heard you acquired a new horse recently, Gray. Bay gelding with a distinctive white blaze. Found it. Ethan closes the door against the storm. On my property, 3 days ago. Found it. Cooper's tone is neutral, but his eyes are sharp. Injured from what I hear. Was. Tending to it. Mighty coincidental, a horse matching that description showing up here. Cooper removes his gloves, especially when a man down Deadwood Way reported such a horse stolen. Man who was tracking another man. One who looked remarkably like your late husband, Mrs. Miller. Sarah meets the sheriff's gaze steadily. So I've heard. You have. Cooper raises an eyebrow. Interesting news travels fast in a storm. Clara Wilson mentioned a stranger asking questions in town, Sarah says. Dr. Foster confirmed it. Cooper studies her face. And what do you make of that? The possibility your husband might not be as deceased as reported. Sarah feels both men watching her, waiting for her response. Her answer now will set her course. If Matthew survived that mine collapse and chose not to return home, then he's no husband of mine. Not anymore. Something like approval flickers in Ethan's eyes. Cooper nods slowly. Fair enough. Still doesn't explain the horse. He turns back to Ethan. Mind if I have a look at it? In the barn. Ethan reaches for his coat. Storm's bad. I've seen worse. Cooper puts his hat back on. Won't take but a minute. As the men prepare to go out, a sound cuts through the howl of the wind. Horses approaching, several of them moving fast despite the storm. Ethan moves to the window, tension suddenly evident in his posture. 4 riders. Cooper joins him, hand moving instinctively to his gun. Expecting company, Gray? No, Ethan's voice has gone cold. But they have. Through the swirling snow, Sarah can make out the approaching riders. 4 men on horseback bundled against the storm. Leading them is a figure she recognizes all too well, the substantial form of Victor Garrett. What's Garrett doing out in this? Cooper mutters, more to himself than to them. Ethan's expression hardens. Looking for something he thinks I have. The horse, Cooper asks, among other things. Ethan turns from the window, his eyes meeting Sarah's. In that brief exchange, she reads his meaning clearly. Garrett isn't just after the horse. He's after the gold, which means he knows about it, which means he's connected to Matthew's activities somehow. The riders rein in outside the cabin. Garrett's voice carries over the storm. Sheriff Cooper, I know you're in there, and I believe you'll want to hear what I have to say about Ethan Gray and that stolen property he's hiding. Cooper looks between Ethan and Sarah, suspicion and uncertainty warring on his face. Something you want to tell me before I go out there? Gray, Ethan's expression gives away nothing. Man makes accusations, doesn't make them true. Cooper's hand remains on his gun. Mrs. Miller, anything you want to add? Sarah thinks of the photograph in her pocket of Matthew's betrayal of Garrett's hungry eyes whenever he looks at her land of Ethan's silent support these past months. Only that Victor Garrett has been trying to get my land since Matthew died. He's not a man whose word I'd trust. Cooper studies her for a long moment and then nods. Wait here, both of you. He moves to the door, stepping out into the storm to confront Garrett and his men. Through the window, Sarah watches as Cooper speaks with Garrett, their words lost to the wind. Garrett gestures emphatically, pointing toward the barn. One of his men dismounts, approaching Cooper with what appears to be a document, a warrant perhaps, or some other legal paper. He's come prepared, Sarah murmurs. Beside her, Ethan remains utterly still, watching the scene unfold with the focused attention of a predator. Been planning this. What will you do if they search the barn, if they find the gold? Ethan's gaze shifts to her. Not just the gold they're after. Before she can ask what he means, the door bursts open. Cooper steps back inside, snow swirling around him, his expression grim. Garrett has a witness, claims he saw you, Gray, attacking a man matching the description of that missing prospector from Deadwood. Says you took his horse and his belongings. Cooper's hand rests on his gun. He's got a search warrant for your property, signed by Judge Hollister. Ethan's expression doesn't change. Convenient. Maybe so, but I'm obliged to execute it. Cooper's eyes narrow. Unless you want to tell me what's really going on here. Ethan is silent for a long moment. Then, his decision made, he moves to the stone hearth and shifts one of the hearthstones, revealing a small hiding place beneath. From it, he withdraws a folded document, which he hands to Cooper. U.S. Marshal, he says simply. Special Appointment, Dakota Territory. Cooper unfolds the document, his eyebrows rising as he reads. Well now, that puts a different complexion on things. He looks up at Ethan with new respect. How long you been carrying a marshal's badge? 3 years, since my family was killed. Ethan takes the document back. Been tracking the men responsible. Official capacity. Cooper processes this revelation. And the prospector from Deadwood. The one whose horse you've got, Matthew Miller. Ethan's gaze flicks to Sarah. Wanted for questioning about bank robberies in Montana Territory. Found his horse like I said. Blood on the saddle. No sign of Miller. Sarah watches the interplay between the two men, seeing the scales of Cooper's judgment tipping in Ethan's favor. And what does Garrett have to do with any of this, Cooper asks. That, Ethan says, is what I've been trying to determine. A shout from outside interrupts them. Garrett, his patience clearly exhausted. Sheriff, we're freezing out here. Execute that warrant or I'll file a complaint with the territorial governor. Cooper sighs, then makes his decision. Mrs. Miller, you stay here. Gray, you and I will go deal with Garrett, Marshal's badge, or no, we need to handle this by the book. As the men prepare to go out, Sarah moves to Ethan's side. Be careful, she says quietly. Garrett didn't bring 3 men with him just for show. Ethan gives her a single nod, his eyes conveying more than words could. Then he and Cooper step out into the storm to confront whatever machinations Garrett has set in motion. Sarah watches through the window as Cooper explains something to Garrett, presumably Ethan's status as a marshal. Garrett's reaction is immediate and angry, his gestures becoming more agitated. The men with him shift on their horses, hands moving closer to weapons. The tension outside is palpable even through the glass and howling wind. Sarah's hand moves to the knife in her boot, a futile gesture of preparation. If shooting starts, there's little she can do from here. As she watches, one of Garrett's men suddenly spurs his horse forward, heading not toward Ethan and Cooper, but toward the barn, making a break for the stolen horse, or the gold, or both. Cooper shouts something, his hand going to his gun. Ethan moves with startling speed for such a big man, cutting off the rider's path. The other 2 men with Garrett now draw their weapons. Cooper does the same. And then through the curtain of snow, a new figure appears. A man on horseback approaching from the direction of the creek. Even at this distance, even through the storm, something about his silhouette strikes Sarah as hauntingly familiar. The newcomer rides directly into the standoff, his arrival momentarily freezing everyone in place. He dismounts slowly, hands raised to show he's unarmed. As he steps into the clear space between the cabin and the barn, Sarah's breath catches. Matthew, her husband, supposedly dead for 2 years, stands in the swirling snow, very much alive. Thinner than she remembers, his face harder, but unmistakably Matthew Miller. Sarah's world narrows to this impossible sight. Through the roaring in her ears, she vaguely registers Garrett's shout of surprise, Cooper's hand tightening on his gun, Ethan's stance shifting subtly to readiness. Without conscious thought, she finds herself moving to the door, pulling it open, stepping out into the storm. The cold hits her like a physical blow, but she barely notices. Matthew. Her voice carries on the wind, causing all heads to turn toward her. Matthew's eyes meet hers across the distance. Those familiar blue eyes she once loved, now filled with a complex mixture of emotions she can't decipher. Shame, perhaps. Desperation, certainly. Sarah. He takes a step toward her, then stops as Cooper levels his gun. That's far enough, Miller, the sheriff says. You've got some explaining to do. Garrett's voice cuts through the tension. He's a thief and a murderer. He stole my gold. At this, Matthew laughs, a harsh, bitter sound. Your gold, Garrett, strange. I thought it belonged to the bank in Helena, the one you and your friends robbed 3 years ago. This accusation hangs in the air like the snowflakes suspended in a moment of shocked silence. Then everything happens at once. Garrett draws his gun, aiming not at Matthew, but at Cooper. One of his men lunges for Ethan. Matthew dives for cover behind a water trough, and a shot rings out. Not from any of the men in the yard, but from Sarah, who stands on the porch with her father's revolver raised, smoke curling from its barrel. The bullet hits no one, but its report freezes the chaos momentarily. All eyes turn to her. The next one, she says, her voice steady despite the storm and the turmoil within her, won't be a warning shot. In that moment of suspended action with Matthew returned from the dead, Garrett revealed as something far worse than a greedy banker. and Ethan's true identity expose the first act of Sarah Miller's new story comes to its tumultuous climax. The old narrative of a widow struggling to survive, of a reclusive neighbor, of a respectable businessman, lies shattered in the snow like the remnants of a life built on shifting sand. What rises from its ruins will depend on the choices made in the storm-racked yard of Ethan Gray's homestead. Sarah keeps the gun leveled, her eyes moving from Matthew to Garrett to Ethan to Cooper, calculating where the true threat lies, where her loyalty should fall, and what remains of the woman she once was, now that everything she believed has proven false. The snow continues to fall indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath the vast Dakota sky. The shot from Sarah's revolver hangs in the air like a declaration. The storm swallows its echo, but the statement remains. 5 men stand frozen in the swirling snow, calculations and recalculations racing behind their eyes. Sheriff Cooper recovers first, keeping his weapon trained on Garrett while addressing Sarah. Sheriff Cooper ain't the kind to be unnerved by a woman with a gun. Not in Dakota territory, not when that woman has just prevented bloodshed with a well-placed warning shot. Sarah Miller, you always been that good a shot, or is that something you learned since your husband died? Sarah doesn't lower her father's revolver. The weight feels right in her hand, the purpose clear. The storm plasters her dress against her body, but she stands unmoved as though rooted to Ethan Gray's porch. My father believed a woman alone should know how to defend herself. Cooper nods, then turns his attention to the man whose sudden appearance has upended everything. Matthew Miller looks like a man who's been running for a long time. Trail-worn, hollow-cheeked eyes constantly moving between Garrett, Cooper, and Ethan. Well now, Mr. Miller, for a dead man you're looking remarkably spry. Garrett's voice cuts through the howling wind, his composure cracking to reveal the desperation beneath. He's a thief, a murderer. Everything he says is a lie. Ethan Gray remains utterly still, his marshal's badge now visible on his vest. His eyes never leave Garrett and his men, measuring distances, angles, intent. Cooper's voice carries authority despite the chaos unfolding around him. Everyone just settle down. We're going to handle this civilized. Mr. Gray, Marshal Gray, I should say, I'm obliged to ask you to take Mrs. Miller back inside. Garrett, you and your men dismount nice and slow. Keep your hands where I can see them. Matthew takes a step forward, snow crunching beneath his boots. Sarah, please. You need to hear what I have to say. His voice, that voice she'd thought silenced forever in a mind collapse, strikes Sarah like a physical blow, familiar and foreign all at once. The voice that had whispered promises under prairie stars, the voice that had lied. The storm intensifies as though nature itself objects to this confrontation. Visibility drops as snow swirls between the figures in the yard. Cooper makes a decision. Inside, all of you, we'll sort this out where we can hear ourselves think. For a tense moment, it seems Garrett might refuse. Then one of his men leans over, whispers something in his ear. Garrett's face twists with barely contained rage, but he nods. Fine. But I want it on record that I'm complying under protest, and that man is dangerous. He points at Matthew, who stands with hands raised, snowflakes accumulating on his shoulders. Inside Ethan's cabin, the sudden shelter from the storm creates an illusion of calm that belies the tension crackling between the occupants. Cooper positions himself near the door, maintaining authority. Garrett and his 2 remaining men stand together near one wall. Matthew keeps his distance from everyone, especially Sarah, who has retreated to stand near Ethan. The fire pops and hisses in the stone hearth, the only sound for several heartbeats. Then Cooper breaks the silence. Let's start simple. Matthew Miller, do you want to explain how a man dead and buried these past 2 years shows up in the middle of a territorial blizzard? Matthew's eyes find Sarah's for a moment, then drop away. There was a mind collapse. That part was real. I was trapped for hours. By the time I dug myself out, everyone had given up looking. Sarah's voice is tight with controlled fury, and you decided to let everyone believe you were dead, your wife included. A flush creeps up Matthew's neck, the only indication that her words have struck home. It wasn't like that. I was going to come back. But then I found something in that mine, something that changed everything. Garrett interrupts, his voice dripping with scorn. Oh, spare us your lies, Miller. You found gold. You stole it, and then you disappeared. Matthew turns to face Garrett, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. I found evidence. Evidence of what you've been doing, who you've been working with, the real reason you bankroll those mining operations. Cooper raises a hand, maintaining control of the rapidly escalating situation. One thing at a time. Evidence of what exactly? Matthew glances at Sarah again, something like apology in his expression. The mine wasn't just a mine. There was a hidden chamber. Documents, maps, supply manifests, evidence that someone was using the mining operation as cover to smuggle weapons to hostile Indian tribes. Winchester repeating rifles, ammunition, military-grade explosives. The revelation lands heavily in the room. Arming hostile tribes is not just criminal, it's treason. Garrett's laugh is forced unconvincing. This is absurd. The man is desperate, making up wild tales to save himself. Matthew continues, his voice gaining strength. The documents had a name on them, a signature. Yours, Garrett. For the briefest moment, real fear flashes across Garrett's face before he masters it. Preposterous. I demand you arrest this man, Sheriff. He's a known criminal, a deserter, and now a slanderer. Cooper's weathered face reveals nothing. You said you found gold as well. Miller. Matthew nods. The chamber was being used as a gold weapons documents. I took some of the gold and the most damning papers. Knew I had to get them to the authorities. But Garrett's reach is long. He has men everywhere. Ethan speaks for the first time since entering the cabin, his voice a low rumble. That part's true enough. Man works with a network. Montana, Wyoming, Dakota. Garrett's composure slips further. You have no proof of any of this? And Matthew takes a step forward, eyes locked on Garrett. I had proof, the documents I took from that chamber. They detailed everything. Your arrangement with the weapons dealers, the gold you skimmed from the bank to finance it, the schedule for deliveries. Ethan shifts his weight almost imperceptibly. Where are those documents now? A shadow crosses Matthew's face. Lost them 3 days ago. Was ambushed near Bear Creek. Took a bullet in the arm. Managed to get on my horse, but the saddlebag with the papers was torn in the fight. Must have fallen somewhere between there and here. His eyes moved to Sarah. I was coming home. Finally, after making sure Garrett couldn't hurt you. Guess I failed at that too. The confession hangs in the air. Sarah's expression remains stone, but something flickers behind her eyes. Not forgiveness, but perhaps understanding. Cooper turns to Ethan. Marshal Gray, you've been tracking bank robbers. How does this fit with your investigation? Ethan's response is measured, each word placed with precision. Been following a series of bank robberies across 3 territories. Helena, Bozeman, Deadwood. Pattern emerged. Each bank was owned by Garrett or his associates. Each robbery targeted specific safety deposit boxes. Looked like inside jobs. Cooper's eyebrows rise. You're suggesting Garrett was robbing his own bank's perfect cover. No one looks too hard at the owner after a robbery, and it explains certain inconsistencies in the reports. Garrett's face darkens with fury. This is outrageous. You have no right to make these accusations. Cooper remains unruffled. Seems to me we've got a lot of claims and not much proof. Mrs. Miller, you've been mighty quiet. Anything you'd like to add? All eyes turn to Sarah. She meets each gaze and turns her expression unreadable. My husband abandoned me, left me to struggle alone while he played outlaw and hero. Whether his reasons were noble or not doesn't change that fact. Her words strike Matthew like physical blows. He flinches but doesn't dispute her assessment. As for Mr. Garrett, I can only say that he's been remarkably persistent about acquiring my land. Land that has no particular value except that it borders Mr. Gray's property in the creek. Perhaps the reason lies in what might be hidden there. Cooper's interest sharpens. Hidden, what do you mean? Sarah looks directly at Matthew. My husband had a habit of concealing things, even before he disappeared. Always had hiding places. Places only he knew about. Understanding dawns on Matthew's face. The root cellar, behind the north wall. Garrett makes a sudden movement, checked instantly by Cooper's raised hand. Easy there, Garrett. Nobody's going anywhere in this storm. Outside, the wind howls with renewed fury, rattling the windows of Ethan's cabin. One of Garrett's men speaks, for the first time his voice low and urgent. Boss, if what they're saying is true, we need to. Garrett silences him with a look, but the damage is done. Cooper's suspicion visibly increases. Need to what exactly? Garrett forces a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. My associate is merely concerned about getting back to town before this storm worsens. As am I. This has been an entertaining diversion, but I see no reason to continue it. You have no evidence of any wrongdoing on my part. Ethan moves to the window, peering out into the swirling white. Storm's getting worse. Nobody's leaving for a while. Garrett's face tightens. You can't keep us here against our will. Cooper's voice is dry as dust. Nobody's keeping you against your will, Garrett. Mother Nature's doing that, unless you fancy freezing to death out there. The cabin falls silent, save for the howling of the wind and the crackling of the fire. The forced proximity of enemies creates a pressure like that before a thunderstorm. Cooper breaks it with a practical suggestion. Marshal Gray, no, I don't suppose you have coffee. The mundane request releases some of the tension. Ethan nods and moves to the stove. Sarah, without being asked, begins to help him, falling into the rhythm of domestic tasks, as though grateful for the distraction. Cooper turns to Garrett and his men. I suggest you all get comfortable. We're going to be here a while. Time passes strangely in the storm-besieged cabin. The coffee is made and distributed in uneasy silence. Positions are maintained. Cooper by the door, Garrett and his men together. Matthew isolated Sarah and Ethan, moving between stove and hearth. Outside, day fades toward an early dusk, the storm showing no signs of abating. The fragile truce is broken when one of Garrett's men rises suddenly. Need to check on the horses. Cooper's hand moves to his gun. Sit down, friend. Horses are fine in the barn. The man hesitates, looking to Garrett for direction. A nearly imperceptible nod from his employer, and he sits back down. But the moment has heightened everyone's awareness of the precarious balance of power in the cabin. Matthew, who has been silent for some time, speaks up. Sheriff, I know you have no reason to believe me, but there's something you should know about Garrett. Something beyond the weapon smuggling. Garrett's laugh is sharp. More tall tales, Miller. Perhaps you'd like to accuse me of cattle rustling next or train robbery. Matthew ignores him, focusing on Cooper. The weapons weren't just going to any hostile tribes. They were specifically targeted. To the bands most likely to attack railroad construction, to disrupt the Northern Pacific extension. Cooper frowns. Why would anyone want to stop the railroad? Ethan answers before Matthew can. Land speculation, railroad changes course, certain properties become worthless. Others become valuable overnight. Understanding dawns on Cooper's face as he turns to Garrett. And you've been buying up land all over the territory. Garrett's expression hardens. That's not a crime, Sheriff. It's business. Matthew presses his advantage. Tell him about Fort Thompson, Garrett. Tell him about what happened to those surveyors. Real fear flashes across Garrett's face for the first time. I don't know what you're talking about. Fort Thompson, summer of '74. 5 railroad surveyors massacred, officially blamed on renegade Sioux. But it wasn't Indians who killed those men, was it? Sarah watches the interplay with growing understanding. The banker who has been pressuring her for years is something far more sinister than she had imagined. Cooper's voice is deadly quiet. That's a serious accusation, Miller. Those men were found scalped. Matthew's eyes never leave Garrett's face, made to look like Indian work. But it was Garrett's men. They wanted the survey destroyed because it showed the best route cutting through land Garrett doesn't own. Silence falls heavily. Even the storm seems to pause as though listening. Then Garrett makes his move. It happens with the sudden violence of a rattlesnake strike. He draws a derringer from inside his coat, a small, easily concealed weapon no one had thought to check for. In the same motion, he grabs Sarah, who stands nearest to him, pulling her against him with the gun pressed to her temple. Enough, I'm leaving, and Mrs. Miller is coming with me. Anyone tries to stop me, she dies. The cabin erupts into motion. Cooper draws his revolver. Ethan reaches for his rifle. Matthew lunges forward, then freezes as Garrett presses the derringer harder against Sarah's head. Don't be stupid, Garrett. Sarah has nothing to do with this. Garrett backs toward the door, using Sarah as a shield. On the contrary, her land is crucial. The final piece I need. The documents Miller stole are on her property. I'm sure of it. Sarah remains eerily calm in Garrett's grasp, her eyes locked with Ethan's. Some unspoken communication passes between them. Cooper tries reason. Think about what you're doing, Garrett. Kidnapping is a hanging offense. Let her go and we can talk this through. Garrett's laugh is brittle with desperation. The time for talking is over. Miller has ruined everything with his meddling. Years of planning of building all destroyed because one man couldn't stay dead. His two men look increasingly uncomfortable with this turn of events. Boss, this ain't what we signed on for. Shut up. Garrett's composure cracks further. All of you back away from the door. Now they comply, creating a path to the exit. Garrett still holding, Sarah reaches for the door handle. In that moment, Sarah makes her move. It's a simple action taught to her by her father years ago. She goes suddenly limp, dropping her weight straight down, slipping from Garrett's grasp before he can react. As she falls, Ethan fires a single shot with preternatural accuracy, striking the derringer and sending it flying from Garrett's hand. The next moments are chaos. Cooper tackles one of Garrett's men as he reaches for a weapon. Matthew drives his shoulder into the second man, sending them both crashing into the wall. And Ethan, moving with the fluid grace of a much younger man, crosses the room in 2 strides and pins Garrett against the door with his forearm across the banker's throat. When the dust settles, Cooper has both of Garrett's men face down on the floor, disarmed and subdued. Ethan holds Garrett immobile, and Sarah stands in the center of the cabin, her father's revolver once again in her hand, covering everyone. Matthew alone remains unburdened and unprestrained. He looks at Sarah with naked admiration. You always were smarter than me. She doesn't acknowledge the compliment. Instead, she addresses Cooper. What happens now? Sheriff Cooper secures his prisoners with practiced efficiency. Now we wait out the storm. Then we head to town, where Mr. Garrett and his associates will enjoy the hospitality of my jail until the circuit judge arrives. Garrett, his face purple with rage and restricted breathing, manages to spit out a threat. This isn't over. You have no proof. Nothing that will stand up in court. Matthew's expression turns thoughtful. The documents I took, the ones that fell from my saddlebag, they'd be proof enough. Ethan relaxes his hold on Garrett slightly, allowing the man to breathe more easily. Storm will have buried them by now, maybe. Maybe not. Sarah's voice is quiet but clear. The photograph, the one of you with your other family. Where did it come from? Pain crosses Matthew's face. It's not what you think, Sarah. Elizabeth is my sister. Robert is my nephew. I sent them money when I could, visited them in Deadwood while I was trying to gather evidence against Garrett. The revelation lands like a stone in still water, ripples of implications spreading outward. Sarah's expression betrays nothing, but her grip on the revolver tightens momentarily. Cooper looks between them, sensing the unresolved currents. Family disputes will have to wait. Right now, we need to secure these prisoners and figure out our next steps. Ethan, still holding Garrett, speaks with quiet authority. Got rope in the barn and chains. Cooper nods. Mrs. Miller, would you keep an eye on our guests while the marshal and I fetch the restraints? Sarah's nod is slight but definite. She positions herself where she can see all 3 prisoners, her revolver steady. As Cooper and Ethan prepare to brave the storm, Matthew approaches Sarah cautiously. I never stopped loving you. Never stopped trying to find a way back to you. Her eyes meet his, hard as flint. You let me think you were dead. For 2 years. You let me struggle alone, nearly lose everything while you played hero. There's no coming back from that. Matthew accepts this with a nod that acknowledges both its truth and its finality. I understand, but there's something you should know, something I found out about your land. This catches her attention. What about my land? The reason Garrett wants it so badly, it's not just about the creek or the connection to Gray's property. It's what's under it. Garrett strains against Ethan's hold, his voice a snarl. Shut your mouth, Miller. Matthew continues, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. Coal, a massive deposit, extends under your property and beyond. Worth a fortune with the railroad coming. That's why he's been so desperate to get you off that land. The revelation strikes Sarah with physical force. All this time struggling to hold on to land she thought valuable only for its connection to her dead dreams, and beneath her feet lay a fortune. Cooper and Ethan exchange a look that acknowledges the importance of this information. Then Cooper opens the door, revealing the storm still raging beyond. Keep them covered, Mrs. Miller. We won't be long. As the men disappear into the swirling white, Sarah is left alone with Matthew and the 3 prisoners. The cabin feels smaller, suddenly the air thick with unspoken words and simmering tensions. Garrett, never one to miss an opportunity, tries a new approach. Mrs. Miller, Sarah, be reasonable. If what your husband says is true, that land of yours is worth a small fortune. I could make you a very rich woman. All of this unpleasantness could be forgotten. Sarah's laugh is brief and without humor. You held a gun to my head 5 minutes ago, Mr. Garrett. Your negotiating position has somewhat deteriorated since then. Matthew watches her with growing respect, seeing not the wife he left behind, but the woman she has become in his absence. The storm's fury increases the wind, finding every crack and crevice in Ethan's cabin. Minutes stretch as Sarah maintains her vigil, the revolver unwavering, despite the fatigue beginning to show in the set of her shoulders. When the door finally opens again, it admits not only Cooper and Ethan, but a blast of frigid air and swirling snow that momentarily blinds everyone in the cabin. In that moment of confusion, one of Garrett's men makes his move. He lunges from the floor with desperate speed, not towards Sarah and her gun, but toward the fire. His hand closes around a burning brand, which he swings wildly, creating a momentary diversion. Garrett seizes the opportunity to break free from Ethan's loosened grip. What follows is a brief but violent struggle. Cooper tackles the man with the brand, driving him to the floor. Ethan moves to recapture Garrett, but the banker has produced another hidden weapon, a small knife that gleams in the firelight. He slashes wildly, forcing Ethan back. Matthew, unarmed but desperate to help, looks around for a weapon. Sarah, maintaining her position, keeps her revolver trained on the third man, preventing him from joining the fray. Garrett, seeing his opportunity, makes for the door. Ethan, blood seeping from a cut on his forearm, moves to intercept him. But it's Matthew who reaches Garrett first, tackling him with such force that both men crash through the door and out into the storm. Cooper, having subdued his opponent, rushes to the doorway. The swirling snow has already obscured the two men, visible only as struggling shadows in the white void. Get back inside, Cooper's voice barely carries over the howling wind. They're gone. We'll never find them in this. Ethan, ignoring his own injury, steps out into the storm, peering into the whiteout conditions. His experienced eye catches what others might miss. Tracks already filling with snow, leading toward the creek. They're heading for your property, Cooper calls to Sarah, who has joined them at the doorway. Gray and I will go after them. Sarah's decision is immediate and irrevocable. I'm coming with you. Cooper starts to object, but Ethan cuts him off with a look. He understands something fundamental about Sarah Miller. This is her fight too, perhaps more than anyone's. The three of them prepare quickly, securing the remaining prisoners and gathering what gear they can. Lanterns, ropes, weapons. The storm rages outside, a white hell that swallows sound and sight. But beneath its chaotic surface lies purpose. Garrett heading for Sarah's land for whatever secrets it holds, and the three of them in pursuit, each with their own reasons for seeing justice done. They set out into the blizzard, a thin rope connecting them so they won't become separated. Ethan leads, his tracking skills evident, even in these impossible conditions. Cooper follows then, Sarah, her determination a palpable force driving her forward. The journey through the storm is a nightmarish struggle against elemental forces. The wind drives snow into their faces with stinging force. Visibility extends no more than a few feet. The cold seeps through clothing, numbing extremities and clouding judgment. But still they press on, following the rapidly disappearing trail left by Garrett and Matthew. Time loses meaning in the white void. Minutes or hours could have passed when they finally reached the boundary of Sarah's property, marked by the fence line, now mostly buried in drifting snow. Ethan pauses, kneeling to examine something visible only to his trained eye. They crossed here, heading toward your cabin. Sarah nods, unsurprised. If Matthew was right about the documents being hidden in the root cellar, that's where Garrett would go. They continue, the storm gradually beginning to abate, as though having tested their resolve and found it sufficient. The familiar shape of Sarah's cabin emerges from the swirling white, a dark, solid presence in a world of formless chaos. They approach cautiously. No lights burn in the windows, but the door stands ajar, snow drifting across the threshold. Ethan signals for silence, then leads them forward, his rifle ready. The interior of the cabin is dark and still showing signs of a hasty search. Furniture, overturned floorboards, pried up Sarah's few possessions, scattered. But no sign of either Garrett or Matthew. Cooper moves to light a lamp, revealing the full extent of the destruction. Sarah surveys the wreckage of her home with a strange detachment, as though it belongs to someone else entirely. Ethan inspects the cabin methodically, reading the signs of struggle like a book. They fought here, then moved on. That way. He points toward the back of the cabin where a trap door leading to the root cellar stands open, a black square in the rough-hewn floor. Cooper raises the lamp, illuminating the first few rungs of a ladder, descending into darkness. Ladies first doesn't apply to situations like this, Mrs. Miller. You stay here while we check it out. Sarah ignores him, stepping forward with the quiet authority of someone in their own domain. It's my cellar, sheriff, and whatever's down there has cost me 2 years of my life already. I'll go. Before either man can object, she has taken the lamp and begun descending the ladder. Cooper and Ethan exchange a look that acknowledges her right to lead this particular expedition, then follow her down into the earth. The root cellar is larger than might be expected, extending well beyond the footprint of the cabin above. Rough-cut timber supports lined earthen walls. Shelves hold preserves and root vegetables, Sarah's careful preparations for winter. But it's the far wall that draws their attention, where the packed earth has been recently disturbed. Sarah raises the lamp higher, revealing two figures locked in a desperate struggle. Matthew has Garrett pinned against the wall, but the banker's hands are wrapped around his throat, slowly strangling him. Both men are bloodied and exhausted, their fight having reached its final deadly phase. Neither notices the arrival of Sarah and the lawman until Cooper's authoritative voice cuts through their struggle. That's enough. Both of you back away from each other. Now the combatants freeze, then slowly disengage. Matthew staggers back, gasping for breath. Garrett remains against the wall, his once fine clothes now filthy and torn, his face a mask of hatred and desperation. Ethan moves forward, rifle trained on Garrett, as Cooper checks Matthew's condition. Sarah holds the lamp steady, illuminating the scene with his warm golden glow. In that moment of relative calm, Garrett makes a final desperate move. His hand darts to his boot, emerging with a small derringer, a backup to the backup, the last-ditch weapon of a man who plans for every contingency. He raises it not toward the lawman, but toward Matthew. You ruined everything. Everything I built. 3 shots ring out simultaneously. Cooper's revolver, Ethan's rifle, and Sarah's weapon all fired in the same instant. Garrett is thrown back against the earthen wall, 3 blooms of red appearing on his chest. The derringer falls unfired from his lifeless hand. Silence descends in the aftermath of violence, broken only by their heavy breathing and the distant howl of the storm above. Matthew looks at Sarah with something like wonder. You saved my life. Her expression reveals nothing of her thoughts as she lowers her smoking gun. Don't read too much into it. Cooper checks Garrett's body, confirming what they already know. The banker's reign of terror and manipulation has come to its end in the dark earth beneath Sarah's cabin. Ethan, ever practical, is examining the wall where Garrett had been digging. He brushes away loose soil, revealing a small metal box embedded in the earth. With careful movements, he extracts it. The box is locked, but the lock is no match for Ethan's hunting knife. Inside, they find papers, maps, letters, contracts. The documentary evidence of Garrett's crimes hidden by Matthew in the one place he thought would be safe. Cooper examines the documents with growing amazement. This is enough to hang a dozen men. Names, dates, amounts. A complete record of the weapons smuggling operation. And look here, proof of Garrett's involvement in the Fort Thompson massacre. Matthew sinks onto a nearby crate, exhaustion finally claiming him. I tried to get them to the territorial governor. Garrett's men intercepted me. I've been running ever since, trying to stay alive long enough to expose him. Sarah looks at her husband, the man she had mourned then hated and now can't quite categorize in her mind. Why hide them here? Why not take them to the authorities immediately? Matthew meets her gaze directly for the first time. Because I didn't know who to trust. Garrett had people everywhere. In the banks, the sheriff's offices, the governor's staff. I needed time to figure out who was clean and who was on his payroll. Cooper nods his understanding. Smart thinking. Corrupt officials have been a problem in the territories for years. But Sarah isn't satisfied. That doesn't explain why you let me think you were dead. Why you didn't at least let me know you were alive. Pain crosses Matthew's face. Because as long as you believed I was dead, you were safe. Garrett had no reason to think you knew anything. The moment he suspected you had information, or that I was in contact with you, you would have become a target. The brutal logic of his decision hangs in the air between them. Sarah absorbs it silently, her expression unreadable in the lamplight. Ethan, still examining the wall where the box was hidden, discovers something else. A second, smaller compartment. From it, he withdraws a leather pouch. He weighs it in his hand, then offers it to Sarah. Feels like gold dust. Fair amount of it, too. Sarah makes no move to take it. I don't want it. Matthew's voice is soft. It was for you. Everything was for you. I was trying to make things right. Sarah's laugh holds no humor. By playing dead, by letting me nearly lose everything we built together. That's a strange definition of making things right. Cooper, sensing the need for privacy in this marital reckoning, gestures to Ethan. Marshal, let's get these documents secured and head back to check on our other prisoners. Mrs. Miller, we'll give you a moment. As the lawmen climb the ladder back to the cabin above, Sarah and Matthew are left alone in the root cellar, surrounded by the physical evidence of secrets long buried. Matthew speaks first, his voice stripped of everything but raw truth. I made a mistake, Sarah, the worst mistake of my life. I thought I was protecting you. I thought exposing Garrett's operation was more important than anything, that it would make my disappearance worth something. I was wrong. Sarah's silence is heavy with the weight of 2 years of struggle and solitude. When she finally speaks, her voice is steady. Yes, you were wrong, and that can never be undone. She moves toward the ladder, ready to leave both the cellar and this conversation behind. But Matthew's next words stop her. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Sarah, or for you to take me back. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you, and that everything I did, misguided as it was, came from wanting to give you the life you deserved. Sarah turns back, regarding him in the fading lamplight. The life I deserved a husband who trusted me enough to share his burdens, who respected me enough to let me decide for myself what risks were worth taking, who loved me enough to know that no amount of gold or coal or justice was worth 2 years of thinking he was dead. Matthew absorbs her words like physical blows, each one landing with devastating accuracy. You're right about all of it. I thought I was being noble, being a hero, but I was just being a coward, afraid to trust you with the truth, afraid to face what I discovered about Garrett and what it might mean for us. Sarah studies him, seeing beneath the trail-worn exterior to the man she had once loved, still recognizable, but forever altered by choices that cannot be unmade. I don't know what happens now, Matthew. I don't know if there is any way forward for us, but I do know this. Whatever life I build from here, it will be on my terms, not yours, not Garrett's, mine. The declaration stands between them. Not a reconciliation, but perhaps the first honest exchange they have had in years. Matthew nods, accepting both its truth and its ambiguity. Above them, the storm has begun to clear, the wind's howl diminishing to an occasional moan. The worst has passed, leaving a transformed landscape in its wake. Just as the confrontations in Ethan's cabin and Sarah's root cellar have left their human landscape irrevocably altered. As Sarah climbs the ladder, emerging into her ransacked cabin, where Cooper and Ethan wait with the precious documents, she feels a strange lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the release that comes with truth finally excavated from its hiding place. Like the coal beneath her property, the secrets have been brought to the surface, their value and their cost now visible in the clear light of day. Cooper is examining the documents, his weathered face grave, as he absorbs their implications. This goes beyond Garrett. Names here of officials in the territorial government, military contractors, land speculators with connections all the way to Washington. Ethan's response is characteristically concise. Bigger fish. Matthew, who has followed Sarah up from the cellar, joins the conversation. That's why I couldn't just take these to the local authorities. The corruption goes too deep. It needed to reach someone above it all, someone who couldn't be bought. Cooper raises an eyebrow. And who might that be? The president himself. Matthew's expression is dead serious. I was thinking of the governor of Wyoming Territory, John Thayer, former general, honest man by all accounts, too new in office to be part of Garrett's network. The strategy is sound if ambitious. Ethan nods his approval. Good choice. Man has Washington connections, military background, would understand the implications. Sarah watches this exchange with a curious detachment, as though observing a play whose outcome no longer affects her personally. Yet she knows this is not true. The documents, the coal beneath her land, Matthew's return from the dead, all of these will shape whatever future emerges from this day. As the group prepares to leave the cabin, gathering the documents and what remains of the gold, the first light of dawn breaks over the eastern horizon. The storm has passed completely, leaving behind a world transformed. Pristine white, all imperfections buried beneath fresh snow. Sarah pauses in her doorway, looking out over her property. Land she has fought for, nearly lost, and now discovered to be more valuable than she had ever imagined. Not just for the coal beneath it, but for the truth it has preserved and finally revealed. The men ready the horses for the journey back to town. Cooper securing the documents, Ethan checking weapons, Matthew moving with the caution of someone still not certain of his place in this new arrangement. Sarah watches them, these men whose lives have become entangled with hers through circumstance and choice as they prepare to mount up. Matthew approaches her one last time. What will you do now with the land, I mean? Sarah considers the question, looking out over the snow-covered expanse that has been both her prison and her salvation these past 2 years. I don't know yet, but whatever I decide, it will be my choice. My future. Matthew nods, accepting both the determination in her voice and the absence of any mention of a shared future. He mounts his horse, wincing slightly from injuries sustained in his fight with Garrett. Cooper approaches practical, as always. Mrs. Miller will need you to come to town. Statements to take, paperwork to file, and it's not safe for you to stay here alone until we're sure we've rounded up all of Garrett's associates. Sarah nods her agreement, but her expression makes it clear this is a temporary arrangement. She has no intention of abandoning her hard-won independence. As they ride away from the cabin, the rising sun casts long shadows across the unmarked snow. Behind them lies death and revelation. Ahead, the uncertain path of justice in a land where law and order are still tenuous concepts. Ethan rides point, his marshal's badge catching the early light. Cooper follows the documents secure in his saddlebags. Matthew keeps a respectful distance from Sarah, who brings up the rear, her gaze occasionally drifting back to her cabin. Small and vulnerable in the vast white landscape, but still standing. Still hers. The journey to town is made in relative silence, each rider absorbed in their own thoughts. The aftermath of violence and truth-telling has left them drained, focused only on the immediate future. Reaching redemption, securing the prisoners, safeguarding the evidence. As they crest the final rise before town, redemption comes into view. A collection of buildings huddled against the winter smoke, rising from chimneys into the clear blue sky. From this distance, it looks peaceful, ordinary. No outward sign of the corruption that had festered within it under Garrett's influence. Cooper voices what they are all thinking. Town's going to change after this. Garrett owned half the businesses, held notes on most of the rest. Folks will be wondering what happens next. Ethan's response is pragmatic. New men will come. Always do. Question is whether they'll be better or worse than what came before. Sarah, who has been largely silent throughout the journey, speaks with quiet certainty. They'll be better, because now we know what to watch for, and we won't be fooled again. Her words carry the weight of hard-won wisdom. Matthew glances at her with respect and regret, seeing clearly the strength that had always been there, the partner he should have trusted rather than protected. As they ride down into redemption, the town begins to stir with the new day. Doors open and curious faces appear. Word of their approach spreads quickly. By the time they reach the main street, a small crowd has gathered, watching in confused fascination as Sheriff Cooper returns with 2 additional prisoners. One of them, the supposedly dead husband of Sarah Miller. Cooper handles the situation with professional efficiency, directing his deputies to secure the new prisoners alongside Garrett's men from the previous day. Ethan assists his marshal's badge, ensuring cooperation despite the shocking nature of the morning's events. Sarah dismounts before the sheriff's office, suddenly aware of the spectacle she presents. A woman in yesterday's clothes, armed, returning with lawmen and prisoners after a night of violence and revelation. The whispers begin, immediately speculation racing through the gathered townspeople like fire through dry grass. Dr. Foster pushes through the crowd, his medical bag in hand, his eyes widening at the sight of Matthew Miller very much alive. Good God, it really is you. Matthew nods, his expression a complex mixture of shame and defiance. It's me, Doc. Sorry to disappoint those who attended my funeral. Foster shakes his head in wonderment, then turns to Sarah. Are you all right? You look like you've been through hell. Sarah almost laughs at the inadequacy of the description. I'm fine, Doctor. Nothing that time won't heal. Her gaze drifts to Matthew as she says this, the double meaning clear to both of them. Some wounds leave no visible marks, but run deeper than any physical injury. Clara Wilson appears at Sarah's side, concern etched on her weathered face. Sarah, dear, come with me. You need rest, clean clothes, and a hot meal. Whatever's happened can wait while you recover your strength. The older woman's kindness, practical unquestioning, breaks through Sarah's composure in a way that danger and confrontation could not. Tears well in her eyes quickly blinked away, but not before Clara notices. Come. My place is just down the street. The men can manage without you for a few hours. Sarah allows herself to be led away, the adrenaline of the night's events finally giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. As they walk, Clara keeps a protective arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the stares and whispers of the townspeople. Behind them, Cooper calls for order as the crowd's questions grow more insistent. Ethan stands silent sentry, his presence alone enough to maintain a degree of calm. And Matthew watches Sarah's retreating form, understanding that whatever future awaits him, jail trial, eventual freedom, it may not include the woman he sacrificed everything to protect and lost anyway. In Clara's small but comfortable home above the dress shop, Sarah finally allows herself to collapse into a chair and events of the past 24 hours crashing over her like a wave. Clara, bless her, asks no questions yet. She simply provides hot water for washing, clean clothes, food, and coffee, the basic necessities that form the foundation of civility even in the midst of chaos. As Sarah changes into a borrowed dress, she catches sight of herself in Clara's small mirror. The face that looks back at her is changed in some indefinable way. Older certainly, but also clearer. As though a veil has been lifted, allowing her to see herself truly for the first time in years. Clara, setting a plate of food before her, finally asks the question burning in every mind in redemption. Your husband. He's alive. It's both statement and question. Sarah nods, taking a sip of the hot coffee. Yes, he is. And what happens now? Sarah considers the question. The same one Matthew had asked her as they prepared to leave her cabin. The answer she gives Clara is both similar and profoundly different. I don't know what happens with Matthew. That's for the law to decide first. Then, we'll see. But I know what happens with me. I keep my land. I make my own way, with or without him. Clara studies her with the wisdom of age and experience. The land may be worth a great deal now from what I hear. Coal, they're saying, enough to make you a wealthy woman. News travels with supernatural speed in small towns. Sarah isn't surprised that the secret beneath her property is already becoming common knowledge. Perhaps. But its true value to me has nothing to do with what's beneath it. It's what it represents. Independence. A life I've carved out for myself even when everything was taken away. Clara nods her understanding, reaching across the table to pat Sarah's hand. Well, whatever you decide, you have friends here. Remember that. The simple assurance is balm to Sarah's soul after years of isolation. She manages a small, genuine smile, perhaps her first since the chaos began. Thank you, Clara. As the day progresses, Sarah rests while redemption buzzes with activity. Cooper and Ethan work methodically to secure prisoners, document evidence, and send telegrams to territorial authorities. Matthew is kept separate from Garrett's men, his status ambiguous, criminal witness, or some complex combination of both. By late afternoon, Sarah feels restored enough to face whatever comes next. She returns to the sheriff's office, where Cooper is sorting through the documents found in her root cellar. Mrs. Miller, feeling better, I hope. Sarah nods, her composure fully restored. Much thank you. Has there been any word from the territorial authorities? Cooper indicates a telegram on his desk. Governor sending a special prosecutor. Be here in 3 days if the trains are running. In the meantime, we're keeping everything under guard. Too many interested parties would like to see these documents disappear. She understands the implication. Garrett may be dead, but his network remains, its extent still unknown. And Matthew Cooper's expression softens slightly. He's cooperating fully, giving names, dates, details of everything he witnessed. It'll help his case when the time comes. Sarah absorbs this without visible reaction. May I see him? Cooper hesitates, then nods. 5 minutes. He's in the back cell away from Garrett's men, for his safety. He leads her through to the jail cells behind the office. Matthew sits on a narrow cot, looking up as they approach. Hope flares briefly in his eyes at the sight of Sarah, quickly tempered by the reality of iron bars between them. Cooper unlocks the cell door. 5 minutes, Miller. I'll be right outside. As the sheriff withdraws, Sarah enters the cell, maintaining a careful distance from her husband. Matthew rises but doesn't approach, respecting the invisible boundary she has established. You look better. Rested. Sarah acknowledges this with a slight nod. Clara Wilson took me in. She's been kind. An awkward silence falls between them, two people who once shared everything now struggling to find common ground. Matthew breaks it first. I heard the territorial governor is sending someone. That's good. These things need to come to light. Sarah studies him. The man she married, the man she mourned, the stranger he has become. When she speaks, her voice is steady. What will happen to you? Matthew shrugs, attempting nonchalance despite the gravity of the question. Hard to say. I did rob those banks with Garrett's men, even if it was to get evidence. But Cooper thinks my testimony against the rest of the network will count in my favor. Reduced sentence, maybe. The word sentence hangs between them, the tangible measure of years they will spend apart, adding to those already lost. And after, if there is an after, Matthew meets her gaze directly, his answer stripped of pretense or expectation. I don't know, Sarah. I've been running so long I haven't thought beyond staying alive and exposing Garrett. Haven't dared to think about a future. He pauses, then continues with painful honesty. I don't expect you to wait. Don't expect forgiveness. What I did to you, there's no making that right. I understand if you want to divorce me, start fresh. The word lands heavily in the small cell. Divorce. Uncommon but not unheard of in the territories, especially in cases of abandonment. A legal severing of ties that would free Sarah completely from her connection to Matthew and whatever consequences his actions might bring. Sarah doesn't immediately respond. Instead, she reaches into her pocket and withdraws the gold band she has worn on a chain since his death, the symbol of promises made and broken. I took this off when I thought you died. Put it on a chain to keep you close to my heart. When I found out you were alive, that you'd lied to me for years, I wanted to throw it away. Matthew watches as she holds the ring in her palm, his expression a study in contained grief. Why didn't you? Sarah closes her fingers around the ring, the metal warm from her pocket. Because whatever happened between us, whatever choices you made, they're part of me now, part of who I've become, and I'm not ashamed of that person. Not anymore. It's not forgiveness, not quite, but it's an acknowledgement of shared history that can neither be erased nor denied. Cooper appears at the cell door, indicating their time is up. Sarah moves to leave, then pauses, turning back to Matthew. I don't know what the future holds for either of us, but I do know this. I won't make any decisions until all the facts are clear, until justice has been served, until I understand everything that happened while you were, gone. Matthew nods, accepting both the ambiguity and the small measure of hope it contains. That's fair. More than fair. As Sarah leaves the cell, Cooper locking it behind her, she feels the weight of the ring in her hand, a physical reminder of bonds that can be broken but never truly undone. Like the coal beneath her land, like the truth buried in her root cellar, some things remain even when hidden from view, shaping the landscape of lives built above them. Outside, the winter sun is beginning its early descent, casting long shadows across Redemption's main street. Ethan Gray stands on the boardwalk outside the sheriff's office, his tall figure unmistakable. He nods to Sarah as she emerges. Mrs. Miller, Marshall Gray. They stand in companionable silence for a moment, watching the town go about its business, the ordinary rhythms of life continuing, despite the extraordinary events of the past day. Ethan speaks first, his words few but carefully chosen. Heading back to my place tomorrow. Storm's cleared. Need to check on things. Sarah understands the unspoken question beneath his statement. I'll be staying in town for a few days. Clara's offered her spare room until this is sorted out. Ethan nods, accepting this. Your cabin will need repairs. Garrett and your husband made quite a mess. The practical observation brings a small smile to Sarah's lips. Yes, they did. Seems to be a talent they shared. A ghost of humor flickers in Ethan's usually stoic expression. When you're ready to head back, let me know. I'll help with the repairs. The offer is simple, straightforward. Neighborly assistance without presumption or hidden agenda. Sarah appreciates it all the more for that simplicity. Thank you, I'll do that. As the sun touches the horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and rose, Sarah reflects on the strange journey that has brought her to this moment. From widow to abandoned wife, from struggling homesteader to potential coal baroness, from isolation to community. The future remains uncertain. Matthew's fate, the extent of Garrett's network, the development of the coal deposit, her own path forward. But for the first time in years, that uncertainty feels like possibility rather than threat. Like ground cleared of debris, ready for new foundations to be laid. In the gathering twilight of Redemption Dakota territory, Sarah Miller stands at the crossroads of past and future, the gold band of her marriage warm in her palm, the key to her cabin safe in her pocket. Whatever comes next will be on her terms, shaped by her choices built with her own hands. It is, she realizes, the only kind of redemption that matters. 3 days can change a lifetime. 3 days of statements given and documents examined. 3 days of whispers spreading through redemption like wildfire. 3 days of Sarah Miller considering what it means to build a life on her own terms. The territorial prosecutor arrived on schedule, a lean, scholarly man named James Harrington, with steel-rimmed spectacles and a reputation for incorruptibility. His presence transformed Sheriff Cooper's office into an impromptu court of inquiry, where the full extent of Garrett's operations began to unfold. Mr. Miller, I understand you were the first to discover evidence of this weapons smuggling operation. Walk me through exactly what you found and when. It was October 12th, 1874, the day of the mine collapse. I was working the west tunnel following a promising vein. The support timbers started to give. I managed to get behind a rock outcropping when the tunnel came down. When I tried to dig out, I broke through into a side chamber that wasn't on any of the mine maps. And what did you find in this chamber? Crates of Winchester, repeating rifles. Model 1873 still in cosmoline. Ammunition, blasting powder, and strong boxes containing gold dust and documents. Ledgers, maps, correspondence. All indicating Mr. Garrett's involvement. His signature was on the shipping manifest. The letters had his initials. And there was a map showing planned attacks on railroad construction sites, with his handwriting in the margins. Sarah sits quietly at the back of the room, watching her husband's testimony. Each revelation reinforces the magnitude of what Matthew discovered and the danger he faced. Yet it does nothing to heal the wound of his deception. Across town in Clara Wilson's spare room, Sarah has created a small sanctuary. A place to think, to plan, to decide what comes next. The coal beneath her land represents a fortune, enough to secure her future regardless of Matthew's fate. But wealth brings its own complications. 3 sharp knocks at the door downstairs interrupt her contemplation. Clara's voice calls up a moment later. Sarah, Marshall Gray is here to see you. Ethan stands in Clara's small parlor hat in hand, his tall frame making the room seem smaller. He nods as Sarah descends the stairs. Mrs. Miller. Marshall. I thought you'd returned to your property. Did. Came back. Prosecutor wants to speak with you again tomorrow. Is that why you came? You could have sent word with one of Cooper's deputies. Could have. The unspoken reason hangs between them. Ethan shifts his weight slightly, a rare sign of uncertainty in a man usually so contained. Found something at your place. While checking the damage, what kind of something? Better if I show you, if you're willing to ride out there. Now weather's clear. Be back before dark. The ride to Sarah's homestead passes in companionable silence. The snow is beginning to melt in places where the sun hits directly, revealing patches of dormant grass beneath. Spring is still months away, but its eventual arrival feels more certain than it did during the height of the storm. Sarah's cabin comes into view, the damage from Garrett and Matthew's confrontation visible even from a distance. A broken window, the door hanging askew on its hinges, but it's still standing, still hers. Ethan reins in his horse at a respectful distance. Found it while checking your root cellar, making sure the foundation wasn't compromised. The root cellar, where Matthew had hidden the documents, where Garrett had died. What did you find? Loose stones, north wall, behind where your preserves were stored. Sarah dismounts, approaching her cabin with a curious mix of ownership and detachment, as though seeing it through new eyes. The interior, as much as she left it, ransacked during Garrett and Matthew's search, bloodstains still darkening the floorboards around the root cellar entrance. Ethan leads the way down the ladder, lighting a lantern he must have left there earlier. The root cellar smells of earth and copper, soil and blood mingled. He moves to the north wall, indicating a section where several stones have been removed from the rough foundation. Was checking the wall integrity. Notice these stones were newer than the others, different mortar. Sarah kneels beside the opening, peering into the darkness beyond. It's a small cavity just large enough to hold what's inside. A metal box similar to the one that contained the documents, but smaller, untouched by the chaos that unfolded in this cellar. Didn't open it, figured it was yours to find. Sarah reaches in, extracting the box. It's locked, but the key, her breath catches as she recognizes it. The small brass key that Matthew had always worn on a leather cord around his neck. The one she'd buried with his empty coffin, placed there by the mine foreman who claimed to have found it near the collapse. She'd kept a duplicate, a matching key to the small box where they stored their most precious documents, their marriage certificate, the deed to the land, Matthew's citizenship papers. She'd assumed that box lost in the mine collapse. Do you want privacy? Ethan's question is typically direct, respectful of boundaries. Sarah considers, then shakes her head. No. Stay. The key turns smoothly in the lock. Inside the box, she finds several items carefully wrapped in oilcloth. A packet of letters tied with faded ribbon, a small leather-bound journal, and beneath them, something that makes her heart stop. A daguerreotype in a silver frame. A portrait of her parents taken before her mother's death when Sarah was still a child in Philadelphia. It had been her most treasured possession, kept on the mantel of their cabin until it disappeared around the time of Matthew's death. She had assumed it lost in her grief-stricken distraction. These are mine, personal things, but I don't understand why they're here, hidden in the wall. Perhaps the answer's in those. Ethan indicates the journal and letters. Sarah unties the ribbon, recognizing Matthew's handwriting on the folded pages. Letters never sent. Dated entries spanning the 2 years of his absence. The first is dated October 15th, 1874, 3 days after the mine collapse. Sarah, if you are reading this, then either I've found the courage to come home, or I've failed and someone else has discovered this hiding place. I pray it's the former. What I've done is unforgivable. I let you believe I was dead while I pursued a dangerous truth. I told myself it was to protect you, and perhaps that was part of it. But the full truth is harder to face. I was a coward, afraid that if I brought this evidence to light, Garrett's influence would bury it and me along with it. Afraid that by involving you, I'd be signing your death warrant. So I made a choice that wasn't mine to make. I took away your right to decide your own fate. The letter continues, detailing Matthew's initial discovery and his panicked decision to use the mine collapse as cover to disappear. The subsequent letters chronicle his efforts to gather more evidence against Garrett, his visits to his sister in Deadwood, his growing awareness of the magnitude of the conspiracy he'd stumbled upon. The journal entries are more personal, revealing a man increasingly tortured by his decision, desperate to return home but convinced that doing so would endanger Sarah, until he had enough evidence to ensure Garrett's downfall. The final entry, dated just 1 week before his reappearance, reads, I've decided to come home, evidence or no evidence. These past months have shown me the emptiness of justice without love of purpose, without connection. If Sarah hates me, if she's moved on, I'll accept that consequence. But I can no longer live this half-life, this ghost existence. Better to face whatever comes with her than continue this hollow crusade alone. Sarah closes the journal, her hands trembling slightly. The words don't erase the pain of Matthew's deception, but they fill in the empty spaces of those missing years, providing context for choices she has struggled to comprehend. Ethan has maintained a respectful distance, examining the root cellar walls with apparent interest, while giving her space to absorb the contents of the box. Now he speaks, his voice low and even. Man made a choice. Wrong one, maybe, but not from weakness. You don't think it was cowardice? Opposite. Takes courage to walk away from everything, to carry a burden alone. But that's just it. He didn't have to carry it alone. He chose to. Ethan considers this, then nods slowly. True enough. Question is what now? Sarah carefully returns the letters and journal to the box, but keeps the daguerreotype of her parents in her hand, running her thumb over their faces behind the glass. I don't know, but I'm grateful you found this. It helps me understand, even if it doesn't change what happened. As they emerge from the root cellar into the fading afternoon light, Sarah looks around her ransacked cabin with new eyes. The damage seems less important now, mere physical disarray that can be repaired with time and effort. The deeper wounds, those are more complex. Ethan helps her secure the cabin before they prepare to return to town. As Sarah mounts her horse, she pauses, looking back at the small homestead that has been both her prison and her salvation these past 2 years. I'll be back to rebuild, whether Matthew is with me or not. Ethan nods, understanding the declaration for what it is. Not a statement about her marriage, but about her connection to this land, this life she has carved out for herself. I'll help, if you want. The offer is simple, uncomplicated. Neighborly assistance with no expectations attached. Sarah finds herself appreciating Ethan Gray's straightforward nature more than ever. I'd like that. Thank you. The prosecutor's investigation continues through the week, gathering momentum as more of Garrett's associates are identified and brought in for questioning. The web of corruption extends further than anyone had imagined. Territorial officials, military contractors, land speculators with connections to Washington. Matthew's testimony proves crucial, his detailed accounts corroborated by the documents found in Sarah's root cellar. The prosecutor makes it clear that while Matthew's participation in bank robberies cannot be overlooked, his role in exposing the larger conspiracy will weigh heavily in his favor. Sarah watches these proceedings with growing clarity about her own path forward. The coal deposits beneath her land represent both opportunity and responsibility. Wealth that could transform not just her life, but the future of redemption itself. 1 week after Garrett's death, Sarah meets with the prosecutor in Sheriff Cooper's office. Her decision has been made informed by all she has learned about Matthew, about herself, and about the land she has fought so hard to keep. Mrs. Miller, do you understand you wish to discuss the matter of the coal deposits on your property? Yes, Mr. Harrington, I've given it considerable thought. The deposits extend beyond my property lines, affecting multiple landowners in the area, including the federal government, yes. The survey maps indicate the largest portion lies under your land in Marshall Gray's property, with smaller sections extending under public lands to the north. I'd like to propose a cooperative development, a partnership between myself, Marshall Gray, if he's willing, and the territorial government, managed responsibly with fair wages for workers and proper safety measures. Harrington removes his spectacles, polishing them thoughtfully. An unusual proposition, Mrs. Miller. Most in your position would simply sell to the highest bidder or attempt to develop the resource themselves for maximum profit. I've seen what greed does to people, Mr. Harrington, what it did to Victor Garrett, what it nearly did to my husband. I have no interest in wealth that comes at the expense of others. Noble sentiments, but the practical implementation would be complex. You'd need expertise, investment capital, political support, all of which I intend to secure. Beginning with your help in navigating the territorial bureaucracy, the prosecutor's expression reveals both surprise and respect. I had not taken you for a businesswoman, Mrs. Miller. I wasn't. But circumstances have a way of revealing capabilities we didn't know we possessed. Indeed, they do. Very well, I'll provide whatever assistance I can within the bounds of my official capacity. And I must say your approach may well serve as a model for responsible resource development in the territories. As Sarah leaves the sheriff's office, she encounters Ethan waiting on the boardwalk, outside his tall figure, unmistakable against the afternoon sky. He falls into step beside her as she walks toward Clara's dress shop. Cooper told me about your proposal, the coal partnership. News travels fast in redemption. Small towns, few secrets. What do you think? Would you consider being part of such an arrangement? Ethan is quiet for several steps, considering the question with his usual thoroughness. Land's been good to me, gave me peace when I needed it. Purpose, too. Partnership might be a way to make sure others benefit as well. So that's a yes. The ghost of a smile touches Ethan's usually stoic features. Reckon so? On one condition. What's that? You run it, the business side. Have a feeling you'd be good at it. The vote of confidence delivered in Ethan's typically understated manner means more to Sarah than elaborate praise from anyone else might have. Thank you, I'd like that. They walk in companionable silence for a moment before Ethan speaks again. Visited your husband this morning. Oh, wanted to understand his intentions, if he's released. The possibility of Matthew's eventual freedom has been a constant undercurrent in Sarah's thoughts. The prosecutor has indicated that with his cooperation, a reduced sentence is likely, perhaps even probation rather than prison time. And what did he say? Said he'll respect whatever you decide. About the land, about your marriage. Said he's done taking choices from you. Sarah absorbs this, recognizing the significance of Matthew's position. After 2 years of making decisions that profoundly affected her life without her knowledge or consent, he is finally acknowledging her autonomy. That's a start. Ethan nods, understanding all that remains unspoken. Man's changed. Hardship does that. Question is whether it changed him in ways that matter. The question lingers as Sarah continues her preparations over the coming days. The cabin is repaired, Ethan and several townspeople lending their labor. The coal partnership begins to take shape with preliminary surveys and legal frameworks established. And through it all, Sarah visits Matthew daily, their conversations gradually rebuilding a foundation of truth between them. 2 weeks after Garrett's death, the territorial governor himself arrives in Redemption, an unprecedented visit prompted by the magnitude of the conspiracy uncovered. Governor John Thayer, a former Civil War general with a reputation for incorruptibility, brings with him the authority to make final decisions regarding both the criminal cases and the proposed coal development. The governor's arrival transforms Redemption. Flags appear on the main street. The hotel undergoes a hasty cleaning. Cooper's deputies ensure that even the muddiest streets are made passable. It's the most excitement the small town has seen in its brief history. Governor Thayer establishes temporary offices in the town hall, a building rarely used for anything more significant than harvest festivals and occasional town meetings. From this humble headquarters, he reviews the evidence compiled by Prosecutor Harrington, meets with key witnesses, and considers the broader implications for territorial governance. On his third day in Redemption, he requests a private meeting with Sarah. She arrives at the appointed time dressed in her best gown, one of Clara's creations made for this specific occasion. The governor rises as she enters, a courteous gesture that puts her immediately at ease. "Mrs. Miller, thank you for coming. Please be seated. Thank you for seeing me, Governor. I understand your time here is limited." "Indeed. But your situation warrants special attention. You've been at the center of quite an extraordinary series of events. Not by choice, I assure you." The governor's smile is sympathetic but shrewd, the expression of a man accustomed to evaluating both people and situations quickly. "Few of life's most significant moments come by choice, Mrs. Miller. It's how we respond to them that defines us, and by all accounts, your response has been exemplary. I simply did what was necessary. For my land, for justice. And in doing so helped uncover a conspiracy that threatened the very foundations of law and order in this territory. That's no small achievement." Sarah accepts the compliment with a slight nod, then moves to the matter at hand. "I assume Prosecutor Harrington has briefed you on my proposal regarding the coal deposits." He has. "A most unusual approach. Most people in your position would simply sell their rights to the highest bidder. As I told Mr. Harrington, I've seen what unchecked greed can do. I have no interest in perpetuating that cycle." Governor Thayer studies her with increased interest. "Your proposal has merit. Cooperative development with proper oversight and fair distribution of profits. It could serve as a model for responsible resource management throughout the territories. That's my hope. The wealth beneath this land should benefit more than just a privileged few." The governor leans back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "There is, however, the matter of your husband's legal situation. His testimony has been invaluable, but he did participate in criminal activities, however noble his ultimate intentions." Sarah has anticipated this pivot in the conversation. "I understand, and while I appreciate that his cooperation will be considered in determining his sentence, I want to be clear that my proposal stands regardless of Matthew's fate. The coal partnership is about the future of this community, not my personal circumstances." Governor Thayer nods, seemingly satisfied with her response. "Well said. Though I must admit I'm curious about your personal intentions. Will you remain in Redemption if your husband faces imprisonment?" The question is direct but not unkind. Sarah answers with equal directness. "This is my home now. Governor, I've fought too hard for it to abandon it regardless of what happens with Matthew. And if he's released, pardoned perhaps in recognition of his service to justice." Sarah meets the governor's gaze steadily. "Then we would have much to discuss, he and I, about trust, about partnership, about what it truly means to share a life together." The governor's expression suggests approval of her measured response. "I believe you would, and I suspect those discussions would be productive. You strike me as a woman of uncommon clarity, Mrs. Miller." As the meeting concludes, Governor Thayer makes one final observation. "You know, Mrs. Miller, the territories need more people like you, people with vision, integrity, and the courage to stand for something beyond their own interest. Have you ever considered a more formal role in territorial governance?" The suggestion catches Sarah by surprise. "I'm hardly qualified, Governor. I have no political experience. Neither did I before the war. What you have is far more valuable. Moral clarity and practical wisdom. Think about it. The coal partnership will need representation in territorial affairs. Sarah leaves the meeting with her mind churning possibilities unfolding before her that she had never contemplated. From struggling widow to businesswoman to potential political figure, a trajectory as unexpected as it is challenging. That evening, a reception is held in the town hall in honor of the governor's visit. All of Redemption attends curious to see the territorial leader and to witness the culmination of events that have transformed their small community. Sarah arrives with Clara, both women dressed in their finest, though Sarah's thoughts are far from social pleasantries. She has made her decision about Matthew, about her future, about the path forward from this crossroads. The clarity she has been seeking these past weeks has finally arrived, crystallized by her conversation with the governor and her own deep reflection. As she mingles with townspeople, many of whom are seeing her in a new light since the revelations about Garrett and the coal deposits, Sarah feels a curious detachment. She participates in conversations, accepts congratulations on her proposed partnership, but part of her is already looking beyond this evening to what comes next. Governor Thayer commands the room's attention, raising his glass in a toast. To redemption, a fitting name for a community that has exposed corruption and embraced a new vision of cooperation and progress. May your example inspire others throughout the territory. The townspeople respond enthusiastically, pride evident in their faces. Even Sheriff Cooper unbends enough to look pleased, though his natural vigilance keeps him scanning the crowd rather than fully relaxing. As the evening progresses, a stir at the entrance draws Sarah's attention. Matthew enters, accompanied by a deputy, but not in restraints. A courtesy extended due to his cooperation in the governor's presence. He looks uncomfortable in the formal setting, his clothes borrowed and slightly ill-fitting, but his gaze immediately finds Sarah across the crowded room. They have not discussed what comes next, not directly. Their conversations in the jail have focused on the past. Explanations, clarifications, the painful excavation of 2 years of deception and misunderstanding. But tonight, with Matthew's presence at this public gathering, the future demands acknowledgement. Sarah makes her way toward him, aware of curious eyes following her progress. The room seems to quiet slightly, the assembled townspeople sensing the significance of this reunion outside the confines of the jail. Matthew stands straighter as she approaches, uncertainty and hope warring in his expression. Sarah, you look beautiful. Thank you. I'm surprised to see you here. Governor's idea said it was important for people to see that I'm cooperating, that I'm not just a criminal. It's a wise approach. Public perception matters. The formality between them is painful, a reminder of the easy intimacy they once shared, now replaced by careful distance. Matthew breaks it with characteristic directness. Have you decided about us? Sarah glances around, aware of the public setting. This isn't the place, Matthew. I know. I need something to hold on to. Some idea of what comes next. The naked vulnerability in his voice touches something in Sarah, a reminder of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. Earnest, unguarded, capable of profound feeling. I've made some decisions about the land, about my future here, but us, that's more complicated. I understand. I don't expect Governor Thayer's arrival interrupts whatever Matthew was about to say. The territorial leader approaches with Prosecutor Harrington at his side, both men regarding Matthew with professional interest. Mr. Miller, I've heard a great deal about you. Your testimony has been most illuminating. Matthew straightens, meeting the governor's gaze directly. Just telling the truth, sir. Finally, indeed. And in doing so, you've helped expose a conspiracy that threatened the very integrity of this territory. That counts for something in my estimation. The governor's words hold significant weight, a hint perhaps of leniency to come. Sarah watches Matthew absorb this, notes the careful way he receives the implied hope without grasping at it desperately. Thank you, sir, though I can't take credit for anything noble. I made a terrible mistake in how I handled what I discovered. Cost my wife 2 years of grief she didn't deserve. The plain acknowledgement of his wrongdoing without excuses or justification strikes Sarah forcefully. This is new. This complete ownership of his mistakes without the desperate explanation that had characterized his initial revelations. Governor Thayer seems similarly impressed. Accountability is rare, Mr. Miller. especially in men who have the opportunity to cast themselves as heroes. Your willingness to acknowledge your mistakes speaks well of your character. The conversation shifts to the broader implications of the conspiracy, the governor probing Matthew's understanding of Garrett's network and its territorial reach. Sarah listens, struck by the clarity and precision of Matthew's responses. No embellishment, no self-aggrandizement, just facts delivered with careful attention to detail. As the governor and prosecutor move on to speak with other guests, Matthew turns back to Sarah, something like peace in his expression, despite the uncertainty of his situation. Whatever happens with the legal proceedings, I want you to know I'm proud of what you're doing with the coal partnership. It's exactly right, exactly what that land deserves. The simple validation offered without any attempt to insert himself into her plans touches Sarah deeply. Thank you. That means more than you might think. A comfortable silence falls between them, perhaps the first since his return. When Matthew speaks again, his voice is quiet, meant only for her. I've had a lot of time to think these past weeks in jail about what matters, about what I'd do differently if given another chance. And what have you concluded? That nothing, not justice, not wealth, not even doing the right thing, matters if you lose the people you love in the process. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. I was wrong. All I did was rob us both of the chance to face trouble together. Sarah studies him, seeing beyond the borrowed clothes and the lingering trail weariness to the essential Matthew, the man she had promised to build a life with before fate and choices intervened. It won't be simple. If there's a path forward for us, it will have to be built on absolute honesty. No more decisions made for my own good without my input. Matthew nods, accepting this condition without hesitation. Completely fair. I've learned that lesson the hardest way possible. An equal partnership. In everything. The coal development, the homestead, whatever comes next. Wouldn't want it any other way. Your vision for this place, for what can be built here, it's better than anything I could have imagined. Sarah takes a deep breath, making the decision she has been moving toward since finding the hidden box in her root cellar. Then perhaps we have a foundation to build on. Not the same as before. Something new. Something stronger. The hope that blooms in Matthew's eyes is tempered with understanding. This is not forgiveness freely given, but a conditional opportunity to begin again with eyes wide open and hard lessons learned. That's more than I deserve. But I swear to you, Sarah, I won't waste the chance. 3 days later, Governor Thayer announces his decisions before departing redemption. Matthew Miller receives a full pardon in exchange for his continued cooperation with territorial authorities as they dismantle what remains of Garrett's network. The coal partnership is formally recognized, with Sarah appointed as its director and representative to the Territorial Commission on Resource Development. As life in redemption gradually returns to its normal rhythms, Sarah and Matthew begin the delicate process of rebuilding. Not just their damaged cabin, but their relationship restructured on a foundation of hard-won truth and mutual respect. Ethan Gray remains a quiet but steady presence, his partnership in the coal development bringing him more fully into the community he had avoided for so long. His friendship with Sarah continues uncomplicated by the return of her husband, based on the shared understanding of what it means to rebuild a life from loss. 1 month after Garrett's death, Sarah stands on the porch of her restored cabin, watching the winter sun sink toward the western horizon. Matthew is inside preparing supper, a reversal of roles that symbolizes their new beginning. Ethan will join them later to discuss the latest developments with the coal surveys. The land stretches before her, dormant under winter's grip, but holding the promise of spring, of growth, of renewal. Like the coal beneath the surface, its value lies not just in what it is, but in what it might become when approached with wisdom and care. Sarah Miller, once a doctor's daughter from Philadelphia, then a homesteader's wife, then a widow struggling to survive, now stands at the threshold of a future she has chosen for herself. A future built not on the shifting sands of others' decisions, but on the solid ground of her own strength and vision. The sun touches the horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in gold and rose. Behind her, the cabin door opens, Matthew's voice calling her to come in from the cold. Ahead, Ethan's figure appears in the distance, riding toward their shared meal and conversation. Sarah takes one last look at the vast Dakota sky, at the land that has both tested and rewarded her, at the life she has fought to make her own. Then she turns toward the warmth of the cabin, toward the future waiting to be written on her terms. This is redemption, Not the erasure of past wounds, but the courage to build something meaningful from their lessons. Not forgetting but choosing to move forward. Not alone, but in partnership with those who have earned the right to walk beside her. Sarah steps inside, closing the door against the winter chill, embracing the warmth of possibilities yet to unfold. 5 years pass in the blink of history's eye. Redemption, once a struggling outpost on the Dakota frontier, has grown into a respectable town with a railroad station, a proper schoolhouse, and streets that no longer turn to mud with every rain. The coal partnership, now known as the Redemption Cooperative, employs over 50 men from the surrounding area with fair wages and safety measures that have become the standard for the territory. Sarah Miller stands on the porch of the expanded homestead, watching the autumn sun sink toward the horizon. The changes in the landscape mirror the changes in her life. Deliberate, hard-won, built on firm foundations rather than fleeting dreams. They said it wouldn't last. Said a woman couldn't run a mining operation. Said the cooperative model would collapse under its own weight. Seems they were wrong on all counts. The world's full of people convinced they know what can't be done until someone goes ahead and does it anyway. Not just me. Couldn't have happened without your support or Matthew's expertise in the tunnels. Partnership, like we said from the beginning. The railroad changed everything. Bringing in equipment, shipping out coal, opening markets we couldn't have reached otherwise, and paying a fair price for it thanks to your negotiations with the Territorial Commission. Most operators would have been at their mercy. We've been fortunate, but fortune favors the prepared and the stubborn. Don't forget, stubborn. The town council meeting starts in an hour. You ready for the vote? As ready as I'll be. 5 years of proving what's possible with the cooperative model. If they can't see the value in expanding it to include the timber operations north of town, no speech of mine will convince them. They'll see it, same way the governor did when he appointed you to the commission. Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come. From the day Matthew disappeared in that mine to now, sometimes it feels like someone else's life. Not someone else's, yours, hard-earned. Matthew joins them on the porch, his face weathered from years working the mines, but his eyes clear and present in a way they hadn't been in the early days after his return. Wagon's ready whenever you are. Cooper said he'd meet us in town. Still can't believe they're naming the new school building after him. He'll hate every minute of the ceremony. Man deserves the recognition. 20 years as sheriff, kept the peace through the boom times, made sure the law applied to everyone, rich or poor. Garrett would have turned this place into his personal kingdom if Cooper hadn't stood firm. If you hadn't stood firm, we all did what was necessary, what was right. The new marshal arrives tomorrow. Young from what I hear, Army background. Cooper picked him personally. Said he reminds him of you in the old days, Ethan. Quiet, observant, more interested in justice than glory. Big boots to fill. Territories changed. More people, more money, more complications. Which is why we need good people in positions of authority. People who understand that power is a responsibility, not a privilege. Like you on the Territorial Commission, I just hope I'm making a difference. So much of governance is compromise negotiation. Sometimes it feels like we're moving backward instead of forward. That's why we need the cooperative. Shows what's possible when people work together instead of just looking out for themselves. Model for something better. The children of redemption are growing up with different expectations. They see women making decisions that matter. They see former adversaries working side by side. They understand that wealth can be created without exploitation. Nothing's perfect. The mines are still dangerous. The winters are still harsh. But we've built something here that matters. Something that lasts. Time to head to town, school dedication, first, and the council meeting. You know, when I first came to this territory, I thought I was following Matthew's dream. Never imagined I'd be building my own. Dreams change. People change. That's not failure. That's growth. 5 years ago, I wasn't sure we had a future, Matthew and I. Too much had happened. Too much trust broken. But you rebuilt, day by day. Same way you rebuilt this place. Not the same as before. Something different. Something stronger. That's redemption. Not going back to what was. Building something better from the lessons of the past. The land remains when we're gone. What matters is what we leave behind. Not just buildings or mines or railroads, but how we change things for those who come after. The sun touches the horizon, painting the autumn landscape in gold and crimson. Another day ending, another beginning just hours away. In this harsh, beautiful country, nothing is guaranteed except the opportunity to face each challenge with courage and conviction. And that has always been enough.